the real definition of coaching. Because look, coaching is a growing industry. It's growing 14% every year. It's a $2 billion industry, but you will be amazed how many people don't know what it is. And shockingly, how many coaches don't know what it is. And that's because it's sort of like this umbrella term what people use to describe somebody that's motivating and empowering and helpful. But they don't really necessarily look into the real definition of coaching. And today we're going to be explaining in it all its detail so that there's absolutely no ambiguity ever again. And everybody knows exactly what coaching is and the power that it has as well.
You know, it's interesting when you say that. Genuinely, when I first became a coach, I remember for the first 6 months, I would say, to a year, in the beginning, I was like, what is coaching? Yeah, I was even questioning it myself. Do you know what I mean? I kept questioning it. What is it? What is it that I'm doing? What am I trying to achieve? Where am I trying to go with this? Like, what am I trying to get my clients to do? What am I going to try to get them to think? Like, I feel like even when I was a coach, in the very, very first stages, I struggled with the definition of coaching. You know, now we know what it is. Like me and you can define coaching inside out, upside down, with our eyes closed. But I understand why so many people struggle with the definition of coaching. I do understand why they struggle with it.
Well, let's break it down then. So, I mean, in its really, really rawest form, I would say it's helping people. But of course, we want to get a little bit more clarity around that today. But I would say if you really don't understand it whatsoever, let's just break it down as helping people. And that's why we create that I help statement, that very short and concise sentence that sort of explains what you do. Otherwise, it's so difficult. I remember I tried to get it into like a 15-minute pitch before and I couldn't do it because it was like, so what do you do? Well, basically, right, I was drug addict and prison and then basically I learned some stuff and I'm now holding them accountable in session, talking to them and sometimes talking, sometimes content, and they feel empowered and stuff, you know. So that's what I do. And they're like, yeah. What? So being able to like narrow it down to a sentence is really helpful. And yeah, you're essentially helping people. That's it in like its rawest form. Should we, before we get into like explaining exactly what it is, should we speak about the misconceptions of coaching? Because I think that's a big one, and that's where people go wrong. They assume they actually know what it is. You know, there's some people that, you know, strive to have a deeper understanding and awareness around it, and that's why they get a bit confused. But there are some people that are quite ignorant in the fact that they think they've completely, you know, sussed it out, but yet they're completely wrong. And I actually hear it a lot because we're coaching trainers. You know, people ask me what I do sometimes, and I say, well, I'm a coaching trainer. I don't really go into too much detail with an I help statement anymore because we don't really need to be doing that whole sort of mini pitch networking stuff anymore. But I say I'm a coaching trainer. You know, I try actually. Do you know what? Like nowadays, I quite enjoy playing it down.
Yeah.
Like
how do you go about that? How do you play it down?
I just say I'm a coaching trainer. I don't mention anything about business. I don't mention anything about community. I don't mention anything about money or success. I used to really lead in with that stuff, really ego. And I wanted them to know. And I would try and drop it in any way I could. That's the complete honest truth. And now I get a lot of satisfaction in doing the complete opposite. Because what I realized is, and this is really interesting, is I realized people like me less if I share it anyway.
Really? Interesting. Yeah. Is that,
as a person.
Do you reckon that's a bit of an assumption, do you think? Or have you gained proof of that you know that people do actually like you a bit less when you share the big story, the big shebang, the success, the journey?
Well, I think it's the way I was going about it. So like I was leading in with like, this is what I've done. And it just makes people feel inferior. It makes people feel intimidated. It makes people feel like you're a bit of a show off. And what it does is it distracts people and it gives people things in order to get to know you by, but they never actually get to know me as a person. So I'd say me as a person, they do like me less. Not that they don't like me, but they see me in a different light, as a different identity. They're focusing on, you know, that identity and that business persona rather than, you know, me as a person. So yeah, I'd probably go as far as saying they do like Lewis less. They're probably impressed by me, but like me less because they don't have an opportunity to get to know me because they're just, you know, I'm bamboozling them with, you know, business stuff. Yeah. So anyway, so now I play it down. I'm like, oh, I'm, you know, coaching trainer. Yeah, so that's about it. I try not to. And when they dig in, I explain a bit, but I don't try and run with it. Anyway, so I mention I'm a coaching trainer, and they say, oh, and this is like talking to someone else as the coach, because there's lots of coaches out in Bali, and I network with them quite often, at events and things, and I'll speak to them. And I'll say, I'm a coaching trainer. They went, what do you mean? How do you help people get clients? And I say, actually, we do have a course that does that, but what we really do is we help train coaches in the first place. And they're like, well, how? What, to build their business? No, the actual coaching tools, the frameworks, the techniques, the models to actually coach somebody. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, breaking down limiting beliefs, shifting perspective, building confidence, the actual models that you take people through when you're coaching somebody. And they're like, oh, I never done any of that. I just, learned a lot about it. Now I share it with my clients. And there's like a big part of us that's like, yeah, that's awesome. Use your personal experience, use your talents. But at the same time, you want to be complementing them with the power of coaching. Otherwise, you're missing a trick. Yeah, you're giving some great information across, but it's not resonating with your audience. They're not taking that, they're not becoming empowered. They're not taking the ownership over those changes within their life. And it's just simply information that doesn't get used. So you have to complement that real life experience with these powerful tools, techniques, frameworks, models, exercises, questions to be able to maximize this. And people don't get it. So there's a lot of probably quite successful coaches that are using that name because it's easy for their clients to identify what they do, but actually they're not coaching, nor do they know what coaching is in the slightest.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it reminds me of the reason, or one of the reasons why we started working together in the first place. Because when we first met, and we tell people the story about how I had part A and you had part B. What I was doing was I was qualifying people as coaches and teaching the tools, and you were helping those coaches grow the coaching business. And then we combined our skills and our knowledge, and it was just the perfect combination. It's almost like the people in which you're referring to and you're talking about, it's kind of like this. They've started at least to figure out part B, how to get some clients, how to put themselves out there, how to build up their profile and stuff like that. But they're confused about part A, the actual training, the tools, the techniques, the methods, the things that we have become famous for at the Coaching Masters, for teaching people the best that there is based on our personal experience and what we've done with our clients. And without that, you can only go so far, because you're going to be solely reliant on handing over your experience, which is valuable, but there's a limit to that. You want to be able to hand over your experience whilst at the same time take people through techniques and methods that help them come to their own realizations that you couldn't have given them. You can only facilitate it. And that's where you've got a long, healthy future as a coach, when you know all of the tools and techniques and you can help. We talk about niching, but technically you could help anybody, because you're taking anybody through these same frameworks and asking the same questions, and you're allowing them to have this realization instead of giving them the realization or giving them the advice. Leads us on quite nicely actually to the definition, doesn't it? Like the definition of coaching. One way I'd like to kick this off as well is of the understanding that the coaching industry as a whole, and coaching as an idea, as a form of being able to help people, is very new. It's very new, in relation to other types of therapies or other industries. It's extremely new. And I think because of that, the definition is up for discussion. I wouldn't go as far as to say that there's one definition. It's been like that since day one, and that's it. Everybody needs to fucking fall in line and follow the rules. The definition is moldable, isn't it? It's changeable.
Well, Oxford Dictionary, which in the UK we use, they don't have it. They think it's either a bus or a sports coach.
Yeah.
And actually, do you know what? Sports coaches, they're not coaches.
No, they're not.
They get called that, but they are, what would they be? I guess a consultant.
Yeah, I guess they're more of a mentor and a teacher, really, aren't they? They're sort of just handing over their past experience, saying, this is what worked for me, so this is the way that I'm going to take. When you get these, I don't watch too much sport, to be fair, but like when you get these famous sportsmen, right? Let's say you've got fucking David Beckham, and then they want David Beckham to be the manager of the England football team. All he's going to be able to do is say, right, well, this is what worked for me. Like this is why I was so successful. So I'm just going to be able to try to give that to you. But of course, like we always say, out of those two Oxford English Dictionary definitions, the bus or the sports coach, the classic coaching that we know of is more like the bus, because you're taking people from A to B. That's the whole intention of coaching, not mentoring, not teaching. And obviously we've got our own viewpoint on this, haven't we? Because we do a bit of all, but it's the classic definition.
Well, we both have a different definition, because I've heard you talk about it before and I've spoken about it before. So we have a slightly different definition. So let's compare them and see where we're at. Can you remember the one that you typically use, or one that's, available to you?
And are we talking about just like the classic coaching, right? Coaching, because obviously we've influenced it now with the coaching masters, but I mean, not so much like a straight up definition, but if I was to explain what classic coaching is in my head, it's where a coach works with a client and facilitates change within that client's perception by asking questions and taking them through frameworks in order for that client's perception to change so much that then they're willing to take action on things that will help them and serve them. In like the purest form, that's just like no mentorship, no teaching, just guidance. Not even guidance, just coaching.
Well, mine's actually the same, but it's just a bit shorter. So mine is, coaching is asking challenging and thought-provoking questions that allows the client to uncover the answer for themselves.
Precisely.
Same thing, a little bit shorter. And I think that the emphasis for you was more on taking that more positive action and more transformative change, which is obviously correct as well. But I think the emphasis that I had there is uncovering the answer for themselves, because I think that's the biggest thing here between the misconception of coaching and what coaching really is. If you consult and give advice and share experiences, it's helpful, but not as helpful is if a client has an epiphany and they know exactly what they do. They take ownership. They realize that it's something that they've figured out for themselves. They're empowered, they're motivated, and they go out and actually do it. Because if you tell somebody to do something, they're already on a back foot. They don't want to do it. I always remember this. I was young, really young. Can't remember how old I was now. 5 years old or something. No, maybe about 8 years old. Who knows? And my room was getting messy, and I thought, it's a bit messy, I'm going to tidy my room. And I literally stood up and I was about to tidy my room, looking forward to it. Thought, it'd be nice to get a clean room. My dad came in, he went, tidy your fucking room. And I just literally thought, fuck you, I'm not going to clean it now. I was about to clean it because I'd made a decision. He told me to, I no longer wanted to, because he took that away from me. He took that decision that I'd made away from me and made it about him rather than about me. And that's the same with a coach who doesn't understand the power of true coaching. Because if they tell somebody what to do, no matter how good it is, no matter how relevant it is, how right it is, how helpful it is, it's never going to be as empowering as somebody who uncovers the answer for themselves.
Definitely, 100% of the time. And that's why coaching is so powerful. And that is why it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. Because when you learn particular questions, techniques, methods, you can facilitate that within another person. And you don't need to know anything about them. You don't need to have any kind of level of expertise in what they do. You don't need to know anything about their personal history. You don't need to be able to give them good advice. You don't need to be able to guide them. You don't need to be able to teach them. You don't need to be able to mentor them. You only need to be able to facilitate those realizations, and you've not given them the realization. You don't even know what their realization is going to be. It's not like you're coaching them and you're thinking, right, what I'm going to do is I'm trying to get them to this realization. There might be an element of that in the back of your mind, but really the realizations that your clients have, those light bulb moments, a lot of the time you can't predict what those things are going to be. You've just facilitated the possibility of that happening. And then when it does happen, then they feel compelled to take action because of the empowerment that they've got. They feel empowered because they are the one that came up with the answer. You felt empowered to tidy your room because you made the decision that you wanted to do it and you saw what the outcome was going to be. And the moment your dad took the empowerment away from you and the ownership, there was much less of a reason to do it then. In fact, you went in the opposite direction. You didn't want to do it, and that's, we see that all the time. Like when coaches, you know what it reminds me of? Sometimes when I watch, I've seen like a few different documentaries, right, about like coercive police interviews. right? Especially in America, where it's just been like a real fucking problem over the last few decades, where people have been arrested and sent to prison for things they've not done because the police have managed to get them to admit to a crime they didn't commit because they're that coercive. And the police, you see that they really want the person sitting in front of them to say a particular thing, right? Like, oh, I killed them in the garage, right? They want them to say that because they know that's where that person has died. And they're trying not to put the words in their mouth, but sometimes it gets to a point where they just have to. They say, right, tell me what happened in the garage. But then all of a sudden it's contaminated, isn't it? It's contaminated. And that's kind of like with coaching. You might feel very strongly that you want to take your client in a certain direction. But as soon as you give them that information, it's contaminated. It's not as powerful. Like, you need to get them to the point where they're having that realization, which you can do with coaching. Like, if you're highly trained and you've got great coaching skills.
Definitely. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to break down some of the different types of sort of therapeutic interventions, some that are similar to coaching, some that are very different, and some you may have heard of, some you may not have heard of. And then we're going to explain what a coaching master is. Because, well, I'll work backwards. A coaching master is somebody that does absolutely everything they can to help somebody. You know, we start off using the coaching tools to empower the individual and allow them to uncover the answer if it's available to them. But then we complement that with various other different things, whether it's experiences, whether it's advice, whether it's knowledge or training or anything you can do, really. If you have to clap, dance, sing, you know, crack a joke, do whatever you need to do in order to add value to that person's life. You know, don't feel like you can't share it. Just feel like it's not, just, you know, understand it's just not always the most powerful tool to use. So, you know, for example, if you've got like a great relatable story that you can share that might, you know, bring some sort of level of clarity to your client, why would you not share that? Just make sure you're using every tool in your toolkit, you know, before just going straight in with like a chit chat that you would have with your mate down the pub. Be more strategic and powerful, and then add some extra things on. Like, you might be able to, you know, give advice, of course, and things like that, but you might also be able to like drop into a yoga session or a Reiki session, or you might actually give them a gym routine to go and like sort out their health. You know, you are somebody who helps others, and you do that in any way you see fit. And there might be this combination that you've concocted that's the winning formula, you know, that it wouldn't have worked with just coaching. Because sometimes coaching can be like, you know, a lot of clarity, but there's just sometimes those blind spots that are good to be just like broken down with a fucking, this is how it is, and this is what worked for me. And you're like, that's what I needed in that moment. So let's break down the different types. There's various different types, of course there is, but the ones that we like to talk about, main one is a consultant, and this is the biggest one people get confused with coaching. A consultant gives advice, simple as that, right? Whereas a coach asks questions. A counselor typically explores past patterns, behaviors and beliefs, and maybe trauma, very much focused on the past and what has happened. Whereas a coach is more, you know, focused on the future and what needs to be done in order to move forward. A teacher is somebody, again, who gives advice, but it's not necessarily their own personal experience. It's more something that they've learned, some sort of training. You know, normally the sort of thing you'd find in an educational setting. So all these things are very similar. They're just slightly different. You know, a consultant gives advice based on probably their experience. A teacher gives advice probably based on education, but not limited to. And then you've got a mentor who's even more so given their advice based on their experience. Like, a mentor's like, this is not necessarily how it's usually taught, but this is what I did. And I want to, like, you know, let you be my protege and follow in my footsteps. And so, yeah, these are all so similar. To the naked eye, you could say, well, a teacher, a consultant, and a mentor, they sound exactly the same, and they're just slightly different angles.
Yeah, exactly.
And with a counselor and a coach, you'd be like, a counselor and a coach are exactly the same. They're asking questions. But a counselor is exploring the past, whereas a coach is asking questions to dig into your mind and allow you to move forward. So, yeah, slight nuances, slight differences, similar yet different.
Yeah, exactly. And because they're similar, that's where the confusion comes from. But the differences are actually huge when you really, really dig into it. Like, let's just make some comparisons at the moment. So let's compare a coach to a mentor, for instance. Picturing a mentor as someone who has been there, done it, and now I'm going to show you how I did it, and you can follow in my footsteps and you can copy me because this is what worked for me, right? That's wildly different to a coach who says, I've got no experience in this. I don't need any experience in this or knowledge, right? Or wisdom. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a set of questions so you can come up with the answer. So you can have a realization and you know what direction you need to move in, what action you need to take, and what you need to do next, right? It's so different between those two.
Exactly. And if you're like taking advice from a mentor, for example, you are assuming that they have more available to them than you do, right? You are completely denying your own potential as an individual to explore what you have available to you that you haven't quite tapped into. Yeah. And mentorship can sometimes be the complete wrong vehicle for you as an individual. It might have worked for them, might not work for you. Let me give you an example. Say, for example, you've got an 18-year-old lad straight out of school who wants to build a business. And he goes to this 60-year-old grey-haired mentor and says, how do I start a business? And he says, well, kid, what you got to do is you got to get yourself an advert in the newspaper. That's what you got to do. That worked for me. I made millions doing that. Get your ad in the newspaper by tomorrow morning, kid. And he goes, thank you, sir. And he doesn't resonate with it. He thinks, I don't really want to be doing that. Even if he did take that advice, he might not get the same outcome. In fact, he likely wouldn't. But say, for example, the business coach turns around and says, what do you think you should do to start a business? And he says, well, I don't know. Maybe I could post it up on social media. That is actually a better suggestion than the mentor would have given him. Now, this is a bit of an extreme example, and you'd hope that the mentor would have some advice to give. But actually, that young individual might not just say, I want to post it on social media. He might go, I've got this brilliant idea to be able to run ads from TikTok, and he might have way more available to him, but yet he's denying that and instead seeking advice from somebody else that might not necessarily get him the result that he's looking for.
Exactly. And then the coach can and would take it further and ask them about what have they tried so far? What haven't they tried so far? What are their barriers? What are their challenges? What excites them? What do they want to do? Where do their strengths lie? So instead of just simply saying, like a mentor would, go and do this because that's what worked for me. And it's very likely you're going to give somebody some advice that isn't going to work for them because everybody's so unique. So instead of that, what a coach does is the coach explores the uniqueness of this individual and understands what it is they're good at, what their strengths are, what their challenges are, what their barriers are, and gets them to get to that moment of realization and thinks, of course, that's what I should be doing. It was in there the whole time. I kind of knew it deep down, but now I can really see it. They're going to be way more motivated to go and take action on that rather than the mentor saying, go and do this simply because it's what worked for me, right? Because you're taking that ownership away again. If you think about a teacher, right? Let's compare the two, a difference between a coach and a teacher. Like you said before, teachers in general, they're relaying information. It's not even like it's information that they've gained based on past experience and they can hand it over because otherwise they would be considered a mentor or a consultant. They're relaying information that was given to them by a teacher that was given to them and so on and so on. So it's just relayed information, so that's even less motivating. And somebody's just like, right, I'm just going to teach you this, right? It's not based on past experience. It's not based on any sort of wisdom that I've got based on where I've gone or what I've done. But this is what someone told me and now I'm going to tell it to you. I mean, fuck me, mate. Like now consider the fact that our entire nation's schooling system is built upon that model. That must be the most unmotivating out of all of the different models, right? Mentorship, guidance, coaching, just the relaying of information while someone stands in front of you and tells you what to think. It must be, it is excruciating, isn't it?
Well, I'd go as far as saying, do not listen to 99% of teachers, right? The only 1% you should listen to are the genuinely passionate teachers who could go off and build a successful career in their area of focus, but just genuinely love teaching. But that's 1%. The other 99% hate their job. And the reason why they're there is because they don't know how to fucking implement the knowledge that they're teaching. Because in reality, you've got university lecturers teaching business and entrepreneurship. If they were really that good, they'd have a business. Let's be honest. Right?
The lecturers at the university that I went to that were teaching acting were diabolical, mate. I'm talking like proper classic pantomime dames kind of level of teaching. And it was just like, oh man, what are we fucking learning here? It's just diabolical. I mean, there are, in like the fucking top drama schools in the world, obviously you've got some incredible mentors, but that's what they are though. Like they're mentors, you know, they're more like fucking consultants really, instead of teachers. But the teaching, if you approach your coaching sessions leading with teaching, you know, I'm going to teach you a lesson here. I'm going to teach you something that's informative or might one day make you take action. You might as well fucking stop it right there, because don't ever lead with teaching. You're not there to teach your clients a lesson. You're there to facilitate a realization.
And I tell you why coaching's so powerful as well is because it doesn't matter how much information you get. The reality is you probably know the answer, but yet you're not doing it for some reason. They say, you know, a lot of people know what to do, but they don't do what they know, right? You know, most people know how to, like, they could probably, if they create a bit of a plan, they know how to build a business. It's not that difficult. You know, it's not, you know, it doesn't take a rocket science to better work out that you need to, like, you know, create some sort of product and, you know, somehow market it and sell it. And you could probably come together with a few ideas that would work. But they're not doing it for some reason. And that's because there's something in their way. Now, the benefit of coaching is you can remove those barriers and blocks that are stopping you from doing the things that you want to do. Whether that's maybe some sort of, you know, restriction in your life that doesn't prevent you from having maybe the time to be able to focus on it. Maybe it's a lack of awareness around what you need to do. Maybe it's doubt, insecurity, limiting beliefs, fear, right? So say, for example, the mentor goes, oh, what you got to do is you got to, you know, get an ad account. You know, you got to write some copyright and you got to run some ads to it. And they go, okay, that makes some sense. But oh God, what about people comment on it and say, you know, you're an idiot? What about if my friends see that I'm starting a business and they start to not like me because I'm like breaking away from the pack? Oh, I'm not going to do it. You know, but until you start to explore that stuff and you get a chance to reframe it, see a different perspective of it, break it down, rebuild it as a more empowering belief that's going to serve you and move you forward, that advice is completely wasted because you're not able to use it.
But you know what? As you were saying that, I literally just thought of a 3-word definition of coaching that separates coaching from mentorship, from consulting, from teaching, from guidance. Asking, not telling. That's essentially, in a nutshell, that's like a really oversimplified version of it, but that's a good mindset to get yourself in order to be a successful coach. Ask, don't tell, because we're not there to tell. You know, a consultant is there to tell. A guide, a mentor, a teacher, they're there to tell, right? They're there to pour information into the top of that person. We're there to extract information from within that person. And there's only one way of doing that, by asking questions and not telling. So ask, don't tell.
Exactly. Just like the business scenario, rather than tell them, you know, this is how you start a business, you would ask them, you know, what do you think you need to do to start the business? That's what you've come to me for. So what do you think? They'd probably reel you off a load of things that they think, otherwise they probably wouldn't be asking that question in the first place and looking for that advice. And then they turn around and say, well, what's stopping you from doing that? And then you find the real problem. Oh, I'm scared. You know, I don't think I can, I've got the ability to do it. You know, and then you just ask another load of questions, and before you know it, you'll get into the real root cause of the problem. You're able to break it down, you're able to get clarity on it, and you're able to find out the information you really need to actually move you forward. Because it's not necessarily always the information that you need.
Well, it's like you said a moment ago, using the example of the of someone who wants to start a business, right? So if we use that as an example, if you've got the mentor, as you mentioned, like the mentor is sitting down with the person who wants to start a business and says, oh, it's easy. All you've got to do is go and put an ad in the newspaper and, you know, go and post it all over your social media and you'll start a business. The coach, being in a position of asking and not telling, is saying, well, up until this stage, why have you not yet started a business? What's stopping you? What are you scared of? What are your challenges? What kind of business do you want to start? Why are you passionate about that? And we're digging and digging and digging and digging. We might find out that that client hasn't started a business because of this deep-seated fear that they've got, that they're going to fucking lose it all, right? You know, we speak about this before. People have this fear of, oh, I'm going to lose it, we'll end up on the street. We might find out that there's this like deep-seated fear that's stopping them from starting a business. Now, the reason why coaching is so powerful is because you never, ever, ever would have realized that this client has that fear unless you keep asking more and more and more questions, right? You'd never come to that realization. If you were the mentor and you simply said, just go and start a business, just go and put some ads in the newspaper, go and talk to people, go. But this client has this fear that that's stopping them from moving forward and being successful. It doesn't matter how much mentorship you give them, they're never, ever going to make a success of it, because you've got to get to the root cause of what's stopping them from doing what it is they want to do. You can only do that by asking questions. It's the only way of doing it, because you need to explore. And that's what separates coaching from all. I mean, like you mentioned a minute ago, okay, counseling, right? That's the one out of this collection that also is geared around asking questions. But that massive difference is that we're asking questions of things fucking dwelling in the past. What happened then? What happened then? Instead of thinking, where are you right now and where do you intend on going? You know, that's a big difference between counseling and coaching.
Because I think there is some crossover, because obviously with coaching, it is good to sometimes explore the past and see where this information has like created your, you know, internal sort of representation of how the world works. You know, find out what scenarios have happened and how they made you feel and what that told you about yourself, so that you can understand it, get clarity from it and move forward from it. But the key is moving forward from it. And another big thing with coaching is there is a big element of action taken and accountability. Whereas I believe, and this is a bit unfair to counselors, because counselors do some really valuable work, because you do have to sometimes really explore your past in order to understand it and untie those knots. And it really helped me. I've done a lot of counseling through my therapy, and I doubt, well, I wouldn't be in a situation without counseling. Whether or not they'd replaced it with coaching to start with and I had the same results, I don't know. But counseling, very, very powerful as well. But what I found, and I was getting to this point already, and I see this a lot in the sort of recovery, is within counseling, they leave you in your shit. They leave you stuck. It's like all they do is they help you dig into a big pile of shit. And then they say, thanks for your session this week. You know, whereas coaching, it's like, let's temporarily go back here to see what the fuck happened. And then before we go and leave this session, I want you to tell me what you're going to do to get out of it and how you're going to move forward and how you can elevate yourself from where you are now to where you want to be. Not, oh, that sounds tough. How did that make you feel? You know, and then they made me feel shit. What did that say about you? They just dig in. And it's like, cool, but you can get to that point. But we don't want it to be a pity party. We don't want it to be like the why me? You know, in the drug and alcohol meetings, they used to say it's pour me a drink, because you end up feeling so upset with yourself that you end up fucking drinking again. And it's like, and I see it. There's this stagnancy in recovery where people don't actually move forward. They you know, battle their addiction and they get to normality in some respect, but they haven't got a plan for the future. Some of them do, but there is this element of stagnancy because it's typically focused on the past and things that are going wrong rather than like the excitement for the future. So yeah, the big difference between a counselor and a coach is a counselor explores the past and typically leaves it there, whereas a coach is somebody who's looking to elevate you, move you forward, set goals and hold you accountable and make sure you're achieving them. Like with a counseling session, it's not very progressive. It's more just a session week on week on week, whereas a coaching session is like, right, last week you said you was going to do this. Did you achieve it? No. Why not? What are you going to do differently next time? And there's a big emphasis on growth, change and progression, as opposed to, oh, if you had a tough week, tell me a bit more about that. You know, no one needs that for their life. They need that for a period of their time to like uncover some of that stuff. But you don't want to be cycling over and over and over again in the same fucking bath of shit, do you?
No, exactly. Because even there, like what you mentioned about growth, change and progression, you know, even if we thought about that in 4 parts, there's exploration, right? The past exploration. Then there's change, growth and progression. It's almost like counseling focuses just on one of those 4 parts, you know, the past exploration. But if you sit within that and you leave it there, then it's not going to be helpful, because then you're not looking to change and grow and progress. You know, it's just, it makes me think as well, like even every time I do a coaching session, because like you mentioned, there are times, right, where it's useful to do some past exploration in order to untie some knots. And even when I take my clients to those places, even briefly, I'm always letting them know, we're not going to stay here. Don't worry, we're not staying here. We're just here briefly to explore this, but by the end of this session, you're going to feel a lot better. I did a practice session with Diana yesterday, right, for the NLP course. Yeah. And it was a really good, like, excellent practice session. We were doing anchoring and stuff like that. And we're breaking down limiting beliefs. And there's a moment, like, throughout the technique that we were doing, where you have to sort of slightly anchor this limiting belief that you've got, you know, this negative feeling that you've got. And even throughout that whole session, like I do with all of my clients, I'm like, we're not staying here. Don't worry. I know this feels shit. I know it's not good to explore this stuff and remain in it, but we are going to move on, right? We are going to move on. But the difference between coaching and counseling is they don't move on. That's the fucking problem. It's like there's the exploration of the shit, and you might untie a couple of knots, of course, which can be very, very useful. But then it's like, well, fucking hell, what now? Where do I go from here? I'm just thinking about it. Now I'm walking away and I'm like, I'm sitting inside of the shit and I'm considering how bad things were and how awful this was and how shit that was, without any idea of, right, okay, but what do I want as of right now, moving into the future? And that's what coaching does, which is very powerful.
It's really powerful to, like, find that dip and get it right to the point where you're able to elevate it up quickly. Like, for example, use an example of building a business. I want to build a business. Why haven't you? Scared of failing. Why are you scared of failing? Well, there was a time where I failed before. All right. Why is that such a bad thing? Well, I felt really ashamed of myself. Okay, where does that come from, that feeling of shame? Well, you know, I felt really ashamed of myself growing up as a child. Right, okay, well, you're not that child anymore. Tell me who you want to become. Exactly. There, bang, you're straight up to the top again. I want to become a leader that inspires and motivates people. Brilliant. Hold on to that. Tell me what you got to do to get to there, and what you need to do to become that person. Bang, straight to the top of the list again. Whereas a counselor is just going to be like, oh, how did that make you feel? You know, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
You know? And it's just like digging unnecessary. Take them down to the point where it's like you feel you've got enough information to be able to thrust them back up. So yeah.
Yeah,
it's how we're very passionate about coaching.
Definitely, we are passionate about coaching, and it makes you realize as well that one of the reasons why there's probably like, is sort of this lucid definition of coaching where it slightly changes person to person and industry to industry is because coaching in many respects has been built upon the shoulders of these different types of, mediums, these different types of therapies and stuff like that. And it's essentially taken like the best bits of all of them and it's left the crap behind that you don't need. And because of that, that's why there's still this open definition, because it hasn't quite been defined yet in one way or such a way that everybody says, yeah, that's it. And that's exciting for everybody listening to the Coaching Masters podcast. That's exciting because we can tell you right now that you are at the forefront of a movement that's moving rapidly, but it's in its infancy. The sheer fact that the Oxford English Dictionary, the oldest dictionary in the world, doesn't even have a definition for what it is we do in this organization and what we talk about on this podcast. That is proof that it's in its infancy. And that's an opportunity, that's an opportunity to get on board with something that's growing rapidly, but still changeable and moldable. Like you can put your stamp on the coaching industry. We've put our stamp on the coaching industry in a massive way within a very short amount of time. And that's because we've hit it in a very impactful way, very passionately, and the doors are still open there for people to put their own stamp on the coaching industry and become very successful, very powerful coaches that change lives. You've just got to make sure you lead with that coaching mindset. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to explore. I'm going to facilitate change, growth, progression. We're going to explore the past a bit, but then we're going to focus on the future. Do a bit of mentoring, teaching, guidance, but it has to be secondary to that coaching mindset.
I'll give you an example. And actually, this particular person I'm about to explain doesn't identify as a coach. However, he could. He's actually what he would call a breathwork practitioner. Okay. And a healer. He heals people from trauma. But I've worked with him, and we do a 2-hour session, and the first 45 minutes is coaching session. Wow. Literally asking me powerful questions. Why the fuck I'm there in the first place? What intentions have I got? And really exploring it to the point where I lie on that table, and he starts facilitating my breath patterns and equanology and the nervous system and, parasympathetic and nervous, all this fucking crazy shit, let me breathe, I'm already in a place where I've exposed why I'm there, and I've already accessed that part of my brain, and he's able to facilitate, that coaching environment with an additional super valuable step of breath work. So he could identify as a breathwork coach, and that would be super valuable because he's leading with he's leading with coaching to empower me to better get the most out of this breathwork session. And then he's using his extra superpowers on top to be able to form his definition of coaching. And like I said, he doesn't identify as a coach, but he could do. And imagine if he didn't do that coaching part. He said, right, today we're going to be doing breath work. And what it's going to do is it's going to help you release emotional trauma, even if you haven't got any, or he's like, right, what we're going to do is we're going to give you some extra clarity today. Or do you know what we're going to do? I'm going to make you feel more confident with this breathwork session. That's what you're going to get. That wouldn't be very helpful, would it? But he says to me, what's your intention for today? And I'm like, well, no, I'd like to feel more connected. And he's like, okay, well, what would it mean to you to feel more connected? Can you describe that to me? What does it look like, sound like, feel like? And then before you know it, I'm like stepping into this world in my mind. And then when that breath comes in, I'm straight to the place I need to go. So power of coaching right there.
That is a great example of the power of coaching, because it's all about guided attention. He's guiding your attention towards your intentions. And he's only doing that by asking you, what are your intentions? So like you said a moment ago, you've accessed a little part of your brain there where it's like, oh, these are where my intentions are. And you're focused on them as you go through your breath work session. So as you're doing the breathing stuff, your mind, your subconscious and your conscious mind are firmly fixed on the answers to the questions that he asked you, which are, what are your intentions? If he didn't ask you any questions beforehand, there would be nothing to focus on. There would be he wouldn't have guided your attention in any way. And you might do some breathing exercises, but it's not linked to anything. But it's linked to the fucking answers to the questions he asked you. And that is the power of coaching, guided attention through well-placed questions. I mean, it's a real life changer.
I like what you said about well-placed questions there. So we teach coaching tools, methods, frameworks, all sorts of different ways to ask the best type of questions. Because obviously there are random questions, and we've just launched a coaching question card deck. And if you want to grab one of those, go to thecoachingmasters.com/card-deck. And that's 52 powerful coaching questions that you can use with your clients. Couldn't help but plug it there. But you can ask random questions, and they are powerful. But there's also certain journeys you can take people through that have specific ways to not just ask, exploratory questions, but also take them in a specific way where it might, remove the things that don't serve them and hold them accountable to actually take action and things like that. Because it's great to have a bit of clarity, but ideally you want clarity and to remove the things that are going to stop you from executing the things that you've realized, and actually hold you accountable and know what you need to do to go out there and take it for yourself.
And that as well is why these coaching questions are so powerful, because a coach understands and believes that the client sitting in front of them has the answer, right? We have that belief. They have the resources, they have the answer based on their past experience. We know that they know what's right for them, what direction they need to move in. They just need their attention guided in that direction. And just to give proof, absolute proof that anybody can do that. Everybody listening to this podcast right now, every single listener, I want you to now think about a pink elephant balanced on top of a blue balloon. Everyone's going to do it, right? You can't not do it. You can try to refuse to think about that pink elephant balanced on top of a blue balloon. You can try really hard not to think about it, but inevitably you're going to think about it, because I've guided your attention by saying, think about this. And you can do that with questions. When you say, what resources do you already have that can help you achieve that goal? What challenges do you need to overcome in order to be that person? What you're doing is you're guiding that person's attention towards the answer, just simply because you've asked them the question. When your breathwork guy says to you, what is your intention for this session? Just like the pink elephant on the blue balloon, you cannot not think about your intention. You have to think about what your intention is, because he's asked you that question. So your mind has already been guided in that direction. That is what separates coaching from everything else, because we are guiding our clients' attention towards the things that will allow them to unlock resources and shift their perspective that will create this motivation to want to take action and create change.
And you mentioned take action and resources there. And I think it might be worth just explaining a very simple framework to you guys right now, because you might be listening to this going, I kind of get it. It's questions, but like those frameworks must be really complicated. They're so easy. In fact, I'll explain one to you in brief, dumb it down a little bit in about a minute. So there's a model that we've sort of adapted called the GROW model, and we've changed it slightly to be more powerful, we believe. And the GROW model stands for goals, resources, obstacles, and way forward. And very simply, you ask questions in those areas. So the goal is, what's your goal? And they might say, start a business. And then you move on to resources, and you say, what resources have you available to you in order to make that happen, in order to start that business? And then you might want to dig a little bit deeper. You might want to explore different types of resources. Maybe it's friends and family that could help. Maybe it's money, maybe it's education, maybe it's skills that you've got. What have you got to make that happen? Because we don't care just about what your goal is. We care about what you've got available to you to fucking make it happen. So that's resources. Next one, obstacles. What's going to stop you from doing that? Because that's what I'm more concerned about, because you would have fucking gone out and done it already. If you've got all the resources, then why not? Why have you not done it? And that's I've got the fear, or I haven't got the time, or I don't believe in myself. And then you can break those things down. And then once they've got clarity and they're like, fuck, I didn't realize this whole time it was the fear that was stopping me, but I'm now ready and I want to show up and I'm going to do it. And I've got everything available to me. Like I've got the money, I've got the education. When I've explored it, I know what my goal is now, which by the way, they may not have known before that conversation. People don't know what they want. People don't know what their goals are, So you ask them their goal, then you ask them the resources that they have available to them to make that happen. Then you ask them the obstacles that are going to stop them from getting there. And then you ask them the way forward. What do you need to do now? And as of today, and then by next week, by your next session, I want that done. No fucking about. No, sitting there in a pity party, pour me a drink. Now you've told me your goal, and you've told me you got all the resources to do it, and you've told me that all the obstacles, you're now aware of them, and you're prepared to make a decision to move through them. And you've now explained to me the way forward to be able to obtain your goal. And you've told me when you're going to do it and how you're going to do it. I fucking expect that done. And you bet if they're paying that money and they're investing in themselves, they're going to get that done because they want an ROI. And they come to that week and they are one step closer to what they want. And that is what we're looking for, results. And that's something that coaching can do for you.
How simple but powerful is that for everybody listening that might think, it sounds really complicated? How simple but powerful? Goals, resources, obstacles, way forward. And you simply ask questions around those 4 stages. And what happens when people attempt even if they go away and they don't immediately nail that goal, you can guarantee they've moved closer towards it. You can guarantee it because they're taking steps, they're progressing.
And if they don't, then you need to work out what those obstacles are and get them broken down, because you're like, well, you said you was going to do this last week, but you didn't. Why not? Because of this. And then bang, that's the topic for your conversation this week. Because if you can break that down and rebuild that in a more empowering and positive way that's going to enable them to get unstuck, then that's the solution they've been looking for. And that's going to help them finally move forward. And they might have been holding themselves stuck for years. So that obstacle that you're able to break down might be the very thing they need. They don't need advice. They don't need mentorship, consultancy, guidance, teaching, training, fucking anything. All they need is to remove the thing that's been holding them stuck their entire life. And that will only ever come if you ask them what the fuck it is.
Definitely. And for those thinking, but what are those questions? What are more models? Then that's what we do at the Coaching Masters. We teach those models. We've got a full-blown 12-week course where we teach the best models, the best questions, the best frameworks to help facilitate that change. And it removes your need to be an expert. It removes your need to be full of wisdom and knowledge and experience, where that's all you're handing over as a guide, as a mentor, as a teacher. Be a coach. That's way more powerful than any of those individually. Be a coach that has elements of teaching, elements of mentorship, elements of guidance, but you lead with coaching. Because think about the model that Lewis just spoke about. It's all based on questions. It's not based on guidance or mentorship. It's about questions within those 4 categories to give your client the realization of what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and then the encouragement to go and do it. That is going to change lives way more, fucking 10 times the amount, 100 times the amount, rather than just giving people advice and telling them what to do.
So there we are, guys. The definition of coaching: asking challenging and thought-provoking questions, allowing the client to uncover the answer themselves, leading with the questions that empower that individual to come to the realization, to come to the decision and take ownership over the solution that they had available to them the whole time. You know, that is going to fill your client with joy when they have that epiphany that they finally know what they need to do. And it was you that helped them realize that. And then it's your job to hold them accountable until they go out and do it. And they're going to be very thankful for you because you are the one that's been given them the ability to get themselves results. So we hope that made sense, guys. Any more information on, of course, coaching, you can always visit our website at www.thecoachingmasters.com. We've got a number of free web classes that explain more about the power of coaching on our resource page, on the free resource page. So feel free to check that out. I think that clarifies coaching pretty well. What do you reckon, Liam?
Absolutely. Very well indeed.